hard for her to do that because a Protestant can't concede 1 point. Because if they concede 1 point, the dominoes start to fall.
Oh, here we go.
You know, and when you talked about being happy where you are in age, my dad lived to be 94, my mom to be 100. And even when my dad was 90 and using a walker, I said, Dad, if you had a choice, would you go back and be 40 again? He said, oh, no.
Wow.
He said, I'm happy I am right where I am. He said, I wouldn't want to go back and start over again at 40.
Yeah.
What about 70? No, I'm ready. He said, and I'm ready to go meet the Lord anytime. He said,
oh, wow.
So, but I realize that too because I'm going to be 70 and I wouldn't go back and be 60 or 50 again.
Yep. I took psychology of the elderly in at University of Houston, which is a great class. And I learned it because I'm a nursing home administrator, you know, by license and trade. The happiest years of someone's life, according to almost all measures, is between the age of 65 and 75. And what I realized in the nursing home is that some of those folks you can't keep apart. And they are most highly sexually driven during that age. So maybe there's a correlation. I don't know.
Yeah.
But those two things may be two separate things. But excuse me, I think that's very hopeful because you're at the peak of happiness.
Oh, I am totally happy. That's like you said, what's the big problem? I can't say that I have. You know, we've been careful with our money and worked hard, and so we have the retirement and we're comfortable there. We just bought an old house and remodeled the whole thing. The only thing that's the same on it is the bricks outside. It's a beautiful house, and I let her design the whole thing, and our daughter's an interior designer. So we're settling in that nice little cozy house now for the rest of our life.
Great.
The kids are grown up, and they're all doing well, and they're our best friends, and I get to come be at a show with you guys.
To evangelize all throughout the world.
And I get to
you just asked what his hang-up was. It was coming here.
And I'm kind of now in charge of my own schedule. I only do things that Janet and I decide to do a year in advance and put them on our calendar. So.
Yeah. So for your work, what keeps you busy now? You're writing. You're traveling.
Yeah, it's a lot of it. We do 10 pilgrimages a year. We're going to start cutting back though. So if anybody wants to go on pilgrimages with us, you got to do it.
Price is going up.
Yeah, it's going to go less frequently, and we'll have to raise the prices a bit. But we do that, and that leading a pilgrimage, you guys have done it, but it takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of time and energy. And then I'm writing. My new book on Genesis just came out 2 months ago with Ignatius Press, and that took a while to do. And now I'm working on the book of Acts.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And doing conferences. I probably have 20 speaking engagements around the country this year. I've cut back a little bit. I'm doing Franciscan University summer conferences and men's conferences and things like that all over. And I'm just enjoying being with my wife now. I mean, I don't work every day anymore.
Yeah, it's great.
And when we get home from this, I have 12 days with nothing to do.
Oh, perfect.
I have some radio shows, but those are fun to do. I do one every Tuesday morning on EWTN called Things in the Bible. We've done 150 of them. Things like rivers and streams, goats and cows, clouds and rain. The next one we did Holiness and Saints. And we've done 150 different topics.
That's awesome. Wow.
And so we do. It's only 10 minutes, but it's fun.
Yeah. Sure.
And so when I get home, I have 12 days. I have nothing on the schedule except for a couple of radio shows.
That's neat.
Well, that's a good time. We're in the Advent season, and it's leading up to Christmas. And perfect.
So going back to your story and coming into the Catholic Church the way you did, I want to go a little deeper on your family. Now, you said in your talk that your parents totally against it.
Yeah,
completely against
both sets of parents.
Your dad actually showed up, but your mom didn't. Oh, both sets of parents. You didn't really touch on her parents.
No, her parents were very upset. They wouldn't come to our house for over a year.
Wow.
They wouldn't.
I guess that's my question is, did they ever come around?
Yeah. For my parents, it was a theological issue because they had become Baptists. And they were raised in a very anti-Catholic environment. So almost everything that they learned, they also learned that the Catholics think this. So it was always an antagonistic thing.
Yeah.
So when I became Catholic, for them, it was a family betrayal and a huge disappointment because they'd raised me to be this good Baptist, and I taught the Bible in Baptist churches, and they're so proud of me, and all of a sudden I joined the enemy camp. And so to them it was a theological thing, but for my wife's family, they were not evangelicals that way. They were more nominal Presbyterians. I mean, they went to a church with a lady pastor and this kind of liberal stuff. They didn't, but they came. My wife is the first Catholic in over 400 years in her family.
Oh wow!
So in their family, they used to claim that they had a Bible that was wrapped. It was from John Huss all the way back to Czechoslovakia, and it was wrapped in an oil skin because they had to hide it in the front yard underground, or the Catholics would kill them. They used to tell these stories. It's all exaggeration, but that's the story that came down to them. So for them, for my wife's family, it was more of a, how could you do that? The first one in 400 years.
Yeah.
Because my wife's mother, they can trace their ancestry to 4 men that were on the Mayflower coming over for the Puritans, religious freedom. And for his side, they came from Czechoslovakia. So they were part of the Czechoslovakian John Huss Reformation there. So they're just staggered and angry that she would break the family tradition. So both of the families really were against us, and we lost all our friends in 2 weeks because I'm not quiet about things. And they all just said, you don't want to argue with Steve because if he decides to do something, he's got reasons for it. And our families came around. I'll just tell you this real quick how that happened with my parents. It came around because my kids, realizing that Grandma and Grandpa were getting older, and I told them you should get to know them because they're old and they're wonderful. So they started, as soon as they got their driver's license, my daughter and her younger brother Jesse started going to visit them for lunch every Tuesday. And they would ask them questions and tell them what they were doing in the church. And my parents were so impressed with the spiritual life of my kids and what we were doing, because they'd see all of a sudden the movies that we were making and things, that they finally said, Steve, we're really proud of what you're doing. We want you to know that we don't understand why you're Catholic, and we're not going to become Catholic, and we're not happy really that you're Catholic, but we know God brought you there for a reason, and the fruit that you are bearing, that is bearing in your life, we're very proud of you now. And we want you to know that we accept and are proud of you. Now, my wife's side of the family, her mother's a book reader, the book clubs and things, So they were one time in Kerrville, Texas, camping with some friends, and the women were sharing the books that they'd been reading. And the one lady says to my mother-in-law, "Oh, I've got a new book you've got to read, Mary." And what are you laughing? You know where this is going. And so she said, "Well, what is it?" And she said, "It's a book called Crossing the Tiber." By a guy named, she said, "Who wrote it?" She's a guy named Steve Ray. She goes, "Oh, that's my son-in-law. You liked his book?" She said, "Oh, yeah, it's the best book I've read, Mary. You got to read that book." Whoa. From that point on, all the animosity was gone.
Wow.
And they didn't become Catholic either. Her father died. Her mother's now in her 90s. But they are now very evangelical, very still that way. But they loved and appreciated what we're doing, and they wanted to come out to Phoenix. Where they live in Phoenix in the winter, so they wanted to see our studio where we made our movies. And in fact, my new book on Genesis, my mother-in-law is now blind. And she just had a lady come in and read aloud to her the whole book of Genesis that I wrote. That's great. And she was saying how much she enjoyed the book I wrote on Genesis. So both families came back over a year or two time, and both because of the fruit of the whole thing. And so then we have good. Then my brother, he became Catholic. My one brother did. My nephew, who was very anti-Catholic, and his wife became. He said, "Steve," he said, "I bought your book on eBay because I wasn't going to get it from you, and I didn't want you to know I was getting it." He said, "But I wasn't 18 pages into that, but I knew you were right." And he said, "In case you want to come, I'm being received into the church this Easter."
Wow. Wow.
Well, the reason I asked that question is because my wife grew up Baptist, and her mom basically at this point doesn't like coming over to our house.
Yeah.
Because,
it's very Catholic.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's like a shrine in there.
Yeah. And so she's, just to be, give her props, I guess, she's just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
She just doesn't appreciate it in the way we do. And so I guess I asked that question because I kind of pulled something the similar way. You're saying that your kids with going through grandma and grandpa, and that's what I tell my kids. I said,
Yes.
if the grandma's going to convert, it's going to be because of you guys.
Yes.
It ain't going to be because she don't want to hear from us.
Right, and the first step isn't even to think of her converting, but just to accept what you're doing.
That's
Yeah.
my
That's the
argument.
first step.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
just
the
want
first
her. She doesn't want to hear it.
Yep.
The topic gets brought up, she shuts it down.
Yep.
And I said, just listen to us, not to try to convert you as much as just to understand we're not going to hell.
Yeah,
you
you
know,
understand who
just
you
to understand
are,
where
right?
we're coming
Trying to
from.
give her peace, honestly.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
really.
And so I told my daughters the last time, or no, I guess it was maybe a year or two ago, and then when they were going to stay the night over at her house, and I said, "Here, put this book in her nightstand and see if she just finds it." It was Crossing the Tiber. I don't know if she's found it yet, but I'm sure she has. But yeah.
Well, first of all, if you understand why she feels that way, and I'll just in 2 minutes explain it because I was there. We are taught as Baptists, we're Protestants, and we still are. And many times, many Baptists gain their identity not by what they are, but by what they're not.
Yeah.
So my dad was very proud of being Baptist, but it was partly because he wasn't Catholic. It was a part of his identity. And they believe that the Catholics have it all wrong. It's a perfect counterfeit of true Christianity, so it's very deceptive. You both read the same book, the Bible, but Catholics don't really read the Bible. They have tradition instead. We both pray, but Catholics pray to dead saints and to Mary, where we pray to God. We believe that Jesus raised from the dead. Catholics still keep him on the cross. We get to heaven because we have faith alone in Christ. There's nothing we can do to get there. It's all by the free merit and gift of Jesus Christ. And Catholics are always talking about works and doing penance. We confess our sins to God. They think they have to confess to it. So they use the same language and they use the same book, but it's a total counterfeit of what's really there. Any attempt to accept you and to act as though it's okay is a way of denying who she really is. By coming into your house and, oh, this is nice and beautiful, she's, in a sense, it's a denial of who she is, and it's hard for her to do that. Because a Protestant can't concede one point. Because if they concede one point, the dominoes start to fall. And so that's a problem. The other thing is, this is what, I didn't tell you this about my mother-in-law. I hope she doesn't watch this show.
Nobody does.
But if she does.
The reason I can talk about my mother-in-law is I know she's not watching.
But I said to my wife, your mother and father are not going to ever listen to me, especially me. Maybe you, but not me. So I'm going to pray every single day a specific prayer, and I'm going to ask God to do something in their life by bringing someone else into their life. That's going to be my specific request. I can't get to them, so I'm going to pray that the Lord will bring somebody else into their life that they respect or that they have a great love or respect for. Well, that's her best friend came. See, that was the lady that said, you got to read this book. And that was a year later, and I prayed that every day. And I remember saying to the Lord, I'd be driving the car. I said, okay, Lord, I'm going to bring this up again. And you said, I'm going to drive you crazy. I am going to bug you to death until you do this for me. Sure. And you said, remember the lady that wanted justice, and she went to the unjust judge and woke him up. And he came down and gave it to her, not because he was a good judge, but because she drove him crazy, kept him away. So I'm going to bother you and drive you. You're the one that said to do it. So I'm going to do it until you do it. And so when that happened, I said to my wife, there's that answer to that prayer. So I tell people, this is what you should do, is take a piece of paper, draw 2 lines down, divide it into 3 columns, put in the first column what you're asking God to do, the second column the date you asked him, and say, okay, now see this column here, Lord? It's in your ballpark now. When you answer this request that I've asked on this day, I'll put the date down here and I'll say thank you for what you did. And people should start doing that. And I made up
as soon as I get home.
I made up 7 rules for dealing with non-Catholic family and friends. There's 7 rules that I came up with, and the 7th one is ask God to bring somebody else into their life. So I say you love them more than you ever loved them before. You do your homework so that when they are interested, you have the answers. You show the joy of the Lord in your life, because people like joyful people and want what they have. You, you have patience, because God is not impatient with us. He takes his time. Pray for him and make sacrifices for him. And the 7th one is ask God to bring somebody else into their life, which is probably the most important of the 7th.
That's a pretty good list.
That's on my website. It's actually was 6. I added a 7th. So if you go on my website, it's called 6 Rules.
That's great. When you were giving your talk last night, that's one of the things that we talked about afterwards is it's not as if once you became Catholic, now what do? Do I shoot back across the bow, now that I'm on this side of the fence or on this boat, looking at that boat?
I like the whole megaphone idea.
Yeah.
I guess this is our megaphone.
There you go.
It
Yeah,
is.
it
That,
sure
the
is.
whole story that I do of the ship and the rafts really resonates with people.
That was great.
It was just
That
something
really
I
was.
thought of in bed, laying there one night trying to think through this. But I can't imagine the number of people that came up and said that really put in perspective
Yes.
Catholic and Protestant for me.
Everybody who came up to us after
Yeah.
the show talked about the ship.
That was it.
Oh, my dad just made the comment afterwards as well. He's just like, that's what the people in RCA are doing. It's like, let me on. They're just going around the boat in circles. Let me on already.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.